Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole. I am the lead student coordinator at First Generation Initiatives. I'm going to serve as the moderator for this. So I just want to start out with a few reminders. Um, you can ask any question, please do. And to do that, you need to ask in the chat. And does everyone here know how to use the chat? It's in the box below. You press chat, it will open up, and then you can just type in your question. And I'll just make sure that all questions are going to be answered at any point during the workshop today. Also, I think everyone is doing this, but if you could please mute your microphone when you are not talking, that will just help eliminate any kind of background noise. And oh, sorry, I got distracted. and yeah, so I think we're ready to go. We're just gonna let our guest speaker introduce herself and talk a little bit about her first generation grad school story. And then I will open it up to questions. So go ahead.
Cool. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Angela Groves, and I am really honored and excited, a little bit nervous, but Micah told me not to be nervous, so I'm not nervous about giving this talk. I kind of wrote a little bit of an outline, just, trying to talk about some of the things that I thought were important in my experience that hopefully will be relevant and somewhat interesting. But I also want to start out by saying, if you do have your video on, thank you for inviting me into your space and letting me, be able to kind of see you. I have the grid view on, so I can see most people's names, but some of the folks that do have their video or a really cool picture, I can see that. So thank you for inviting me into your space. Also, I don't know if most classes are happening like through Zoom or through Microsoft Teams or something like that, but I did want folks to know about the virtual background feature because I know that sometimes, people can, not want to necessarily be inviting to 50 people in their home or wherever they're at. So I definitely wanted to take time to talk about that a little bit. In Zoom, it's under the stop video caret that is pointing up, and then you can choose virtual background. And there are already some like pre-installed in there, and then you can even use like really cool backgrounds, pictures. Some of the folks that were in when I got in saw my really cool background from Colorado State University that I used in class yesterday because that was our theme. So I definitely wanted to talk about that just because I've been seeing a lot of like social media things, talking about equity during this time and things like that. And I think that that can be really useful for people to utilize at this time. So without further ado, here's my story. So I also want to thank Sam for reaching out to me to be able to kind of be here today and share my story. We had a really interesting conversation because I believe that I identify as a first generation student, even though my story is probably a little bit different than potentially most first generation students, in being that my dad, he is a minister and he has earned degrees while I was like in high school and like exiting high school. And so for a lot of people, keeping with the quote unquote traditional idea of a first generation student, I might not kind of fit the bill. But because his experience was so completely different from what I experienced and just different questions that I had and things like that about like, what's financial aid? What is this? What is that? And he was like, oh, I don't know, like go ask somebody, so that's why I identify in that way. And if you definitely have like questions about it, I'd be happy to, have a conversation about that. But I kind of wanted to start out with that. With that being the case, I was really blessed to be able to attend a high school that was more of like a college prep type high school. And I remember my summer before my freshman year, I walked in because I had to do some summer school kind of prep to get me ready for math class because math is the best thing in the world. And we had these huge red doors in our school, and all of the teachers were saying, like, as soon as you cross kind of that threshold of the red doors, you know, you should be in this mindset that like you're going to college, like no matter what background you have, no matter what identities you have, like you're going to college, like we're gonna make it happen. So you put in the work, we'll put in the work, you're gonna go. And that's kind of exactly what happened. You know, we had really great counselors and things like that, and teachers that had, it seems like, all the time in the world to kind of give support and answer those questions of, you know, how does college applications work? You know, how do scholarships work? Like, you mean I have to write an essay for each of these things? Like, who has time for that? Like, am I supposed to be prioritizing this or like stuff for school or tests? Like, you know, so just really having that support system in the faculty at my high school was really, really important for me because I couldn't necessarily, you know, ask my parents about things like that. Because again, my dad's experience was so different. And then my mom didn't really have, you know, the answers to those questions that I had. Um, so yeah, that was high school. High school is like the hardest thing that I had to go through, and I think to this day that is my greatest accomplishment is graduating from high school. Even though other people in my family had graduated from high school, but it was just, it was so tough. It was so tough for me. Um, but in my uh, junior year, I guess, you know, and taking the ACT and all of that, um, and then thinking about colleges that I wanted to apply for, it was a really kind of funny thing that happened because I was in that mindset, like, I just want to leave. Like, I just want to get as far away as possible from where I'm at right now. And, you know, I just want to like go study the thing like of my dreams and like become whatever. At the time, I really wanted to study kinesiology, or like studying about the body and, you know, kind of functions and how they work and muscles and all of that stuff, because that is fascinating to me. And when I had accepted to go to college at Colorado State, go Rams, my mom was like, "Why don't you, you know, go in undeclared, you know, so then you can kind of have that college experience of kind of, you know, doing something, maybe not liking it, doing something else, really liking it, kind of figuring it out instead of trying to have like a plan, you know, the whole time." And I was like, okay, like why not, you know, let's just do that. And I found this program at orientation called the Key Communities. And I actually was not invited to this talk that they were having, but the only other Black student in my whole orientation like session. And this orientation session was like, I don't even know, like 400 people or so. And that was like the only other like Black person that I could see. I remember we looked at each other across the room and I was like, hey. And then we ended up being in the same group, which was like really funny. And so she was like, oh, I have this like really cool meeting I'm going to, like, do you want to come? And I was like, I don't know. I wasn't invited. What if they kick me out? And she was like, man, whatever. Like, let's just go. So I just was like, I'm supposed to be here, and they talked about this really cool program, and I was like, wow, like I'm really glad I like crashed this party, I'm gonna like apply. And that's what I did, and I got accepted for what's called a residential learning community. So I know at MSU Denver there's not necessarily like on campus, you know, housing. At CSU Fort Collins, there's on campus housing, and they have specific like programs sometimes within the residence halls that you can stay in. And so this program was really about students who like didn't know what they wanted to major in, and kind of getting us equipped with those resources around campus to say, hey, if you have a question about like your studies, like definitely go talk to an advisor that has been handpicked for you for this program. Or hey, if you're having or you know, you want to explore some other parts of your identity, like you know, your race, for example, there's like cultural centers and like things like that. So just getting like a bunch of resources. Everybody needs to know where financial aid is. So that was like one of our first like little field trips, and then I was in there like every week asking questions like, how much does this cost? Does this mean it's due right now? Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? You know, stuff like that. So that was a really awesome program. And I was in it for my freshman and sophomore year. Sophomore year, I kind of went into this other program called Key Plus, which was again for students that weren't in their first year. And I really loved it, and just kind of bonded even more with my community that I was with like before, and kind of bonded across campus with other communities and things like that. So that was an amazing experience. Then my junior year, I actually applied to be a mentor within that program because I felt like my mentor did a really good job, and I thought that there were like some other things that I could do to really like support students in the ways that maybe I needed to be supported or other people around me in the same program needed to be supported. So I ventured and did that. Um, so that was my junior year, and then senior year of college. Some things like definitely shifted. So my freshman year, I actually declared my major in ethnic studies, and I changed my major, I want to say like 3.5 times. So at first I was ethnic studies and biomedical science double major. Then I was ethnic studies biomedical science minor. Then I was ethnic studies psychology major. And what I ended up with was ethnic studies with a psychology minor, even though that doesn't exist. But I did all the work, so it does exist. Okay, it's just not on paper, not on my transcript, but it does exist. So my up until my senior year, I actually was taking classes primarily in my ethnic studies department, and I loved it so much. Like I was in my professor's office hours even if I didn't have their class. Like it was amazing. My community was just amazing. I revamped a student group, which I served as the president for. Like it was just an amazing experience. Then everything kind of crashed when I was in my senior year because I had to take my upper division classes for my psychology major at the time, and I was taking classes that were like, let's talk about Sigmund Freud for 3 weeks, or like just stuff that I just like didn't care about. I was like, yes, they did some important things or whatever, but I just don't really care about the content as much. And in that space, like I didn't really know like who the chair of the psychology department was, like where their office was, like different resources and things like that. And that definitely can fall on me, but I think also it is the responsibility of the department to say, hey, we're here to support you. If you need support, here's people that you can reach out to. And I had found that in my other department, and so not having that my senior year was really annoying, really annoying. So I didn't have any ethnic studies classes, which like I was crying about every day. I tried to be in the department as much as I could, but unfortunately, because none of my coursework kind of related to that department, it was kind of pointless to be there unless I was saying hi to people in my community or seeing what exciting classes they were taking instead. And a couple of racially biased incidents happened my senior year, and one in particular really struck me. I lived on campus all 4 years just because it just seemed to make the most sense to me with what I was involved in on campus and things like that. And so we had a person in each hall that was kind of like an RA, but they had more responsibilities in talking about like more inclusive content. And so, for example, someone made a board, like a bulletin board, with information about how the Black Lives Matter movement, got started, and key kind of players in that movement. And I remember it was up for maybe like 2 days, and then somebody, sorry, my voice is kind of shaking a little bit. I'm still really mad about this. I'm trying to get through it. But somebody had defaced the board in this section where the person was talking about how Trayvon Martin was killed, and someone had actually like crossed out his name and wrote like a thug like every time his name showed up. And I just remember kind of it was something that you had to pass to like get to the elevators or get to the stairs. where like the residence part of the residence hall actually started. So it's something that everybody in the building who actually lived there would have to pass every time. And so I remember, you know, just being so like upset about it. And um, it was, you know, in the midst of, you know, not having my community as strong, you know, in the ethnic studies department and things like that. And I just felt like nobody cared, like nobody was doing anything about it. And if I told the person who was like the director of the hall, like, you know, nothing would kind of happen to whoever decided to do this or anything. So I was just feeling very like helpless and worthless. Like I'm just here spending my money and like that's it. Like that's all they care about. I'm just kind of a number. I'm just a student on somebody's list. That my voice is not being heard. And so that was really, really annoying to me. And that was a pinnacle because in my life, I'm gonna grab one of my props here. In my life, I've worked really hard. This is one of my black belts. I do martial arts. I do 3 different martial arts, and all of that work is kind of like culminated into this belt right here that I wear currently. But it was kind of this idea of like I can potentially like protect myself physically, right? If somebody decides to try to invict violence upon me, I can defend myself physically. But when somebody, you know, has these biases and somebody has these prejudices against me, or you know, makes policies and things like that that, you know, I can't really do anything about, like that makes me feel really, really helpless. And at that point I was thinking, this is my senior year, right? Like I'm about to get out of here, but what about the folks that are going through this that are in their freshman year, or you know, they're not even on campus yet, or what have you, you know, just different parts of their college journey, um, on top of all the other identities that they might have. Like what can I do to like really do something so that, you know, they feel empowered to like keep going. And so that thought was kind of through my mind all the rest throughout my senior year. I talked to my advisor and I was like, I need to get the heck out of here. Like, I don't know how, like, I know there's a form for everything. Like, how do I get out of here? I've done, you know, I only have like 3 more classes in my psychology studies, but I just don't think I just don't think I have the wherewithal to just like get through that. So like what else can I do to be able to graduate on time, right, within those 4 years? And so there was a form for that, like, you know, there's an app for that, there's a form for that at my institution. And so I had to get a signature from the chair of my primary study, which was ethnic studies. And they said, oh yeah, like, you know, all you have is three more classes to get another major, so that's definitely like those minor requirements. So yeah, you're good. And I remember walking out like feeling again like so empowered from that department of study. Like y'all are like actually listening to me. Like the fatigue is real. I literally cannot be here and like be successful anymore. Like I need to get out. And so that was great. Then graduation happened. Yay. And I was so just like so happy. My parents got to come to my graduation, and my grandparents, which was really, really special for me, because my grandpa has a lot of pre-existing conditions and things like that that he goes through. So it was like amazing that he got to come to my college graduation, and I'm hoping that he hangs in there a little bit more so that he can come to my graduate school graduation. So then after graduating from undergrad, I was able to work for a little bit because I was like, I like, you know, gaining knowledge and all of these things, working on special projects, you know, networking with people through an academic lens, but I just do not have like the energy. Like I just don't. I need to take a break. And it's really good that I did, because before I started working, I really thought that I wanted to do something that has the label of educational leadership and policy. And I was like, oh yeah, like if I do this, and I can like be a principal in a K through 12 school and like potentially be on the school board and like all of this stuff, like all of this policy stuff. And I feel like if I could see Dr. Garcia right now, she'd be laughing, because I had her class last quarter and I was like, I can't do policy. So the shift there, you know. And through working, I worked at a community center that was based in a um, K through 8 school, I believe, a K through 8 school, and it was an amazing experience. I got to work with a lot of people in my own community, even some of my family members who utilize like my services. Like I taught a computer class, and I had all the grandmas in my class, and they were so sharp, and I miss them every single day because they'd be like, "Wow, I sent an email," and like they'd be like so excited, like in tears, and I was like, "I love this so much." So if I can like do something like that in the future, I totally will. But through working at an elementary school, I was like, I definitely cannot work with the under 18 population. Like I just cannot do it. I'm just being real with myself. I learned a lot about myself, and I was like, I have to work with adults or um 18 and above. I Oh, I'm seeing some things in the chat. I'm seeing Oh, nice. Yeah, make sure to, help people learn those little technology things, especially in this time. Like it's really important, and you'll be very happy to like see them as well. Um, and so learning that about myself, I was like, when I was in college, when I worked with the key communities as a mentor, I just loved it every single day that I was able to, go to work and do the work that I was doing. It was never like, oh man, I gotta go to work tomorrow, right? It might have been, it's 15 degrees outside and I don't want to walk all the way over there, right? Or I don't want to go all the way over there. But as soon as I was there, it was warm, it was inviting, it was just so purposeful. And I just remember having so many flashbacks of like, oh man, I remember that and I can't wait to get back. And so that kind of curbed my interest for, you know what, I do want to earn my doctorate one day, and a good step between undergrad and doctorate is probably a master's degree. So what kind of degree should I, try to apply for that would be the most relevant to the work that I did and the work that I want to continue to do? And so then higher education kind of popped up because I was talking to some of my mentors and some of the people that I had worked with in those jobs and, in my major and things like that at CSU. And they were like, oh yeah, like I think we'd be like awesome at this, there's a lot of theory behind it, there's a lot of informed practice that I think you'd be really good at, especially when thinking about community. And if you know me, I'm a big community person, and just trying to involve um, everyone, because I think that's really important to have different perspectives and things like that. So higher ed it was. Then the whole, how does grad school work kind of conversation happened. And I was like, well, I can't really, again, very similar to my undergraduate or high school to undergraduate story of like, I don't really know like who to ask like around me right now. So it was a lot of, reaching out to professors and things like that that I'd had in the past in my department of study, or people who were in the program at Colorado State, and just kind of like talking about their experience, like, oh, do I want to apply to the program at CSU? Are there other programs that are similar? Like, what are kind of like those differences? And so the process, I would say, was similar, um, but also completely different, because something that I didn't really remember looking at from high school to undergrad was really about like those values. What does the institution value? What does the department value? Because in undergrad, at least in my experience, it was more of, you look at the university's kind of like values, because you can kind of end up wherever in the university, unless you're like, I want to be a doctor, I already know that I'm going to be pre-med, like, having all of that stuff. So then you can kind of look more departmental. But in my experience, it was not like that. And so I was kind of looking around for programs that, really focus on like diversity and like equity. Something called inclusive excellence came up a lot, especially at the University of Denver, which is where I do study now. And again, just looking at the different departments and like what faculty were a part of them, what were their research interests. Like it was a lot more research heavy than I would say for undergrad, but especially for the program that I wanted to do, because I needed to know that the people who are actually going to be teaching me and that I was going to be engaging with actually care about what they do. And I could see that care in their research practices, and even the way that they introduce themselves or like talk to you and things like that. So I ended up applying to the University of Denver, and then another university, which I won't mention because I'm still kind of upset with them because they never got back to me. So I did all of this really hard work of, um, seeing, who worked there, what are your values, all of this stuff. Um, Reached back out to my community at CSU, asked for like all their letters of rec, did all the what are those things called? Personal statements. I think for each school I had to write two, so that was very nerve wracking. Instead of potentially the one for the college essay, if you went that route, or the Common App, which shout out to Common App sometimes because that was really easy to do. So I did all of this hard work, and then you're kind of in that anticipation stage of, okay, it's January 13th, like I should hear something in the next like 2 days or so, right? And then hearing from one school and not hearing anything at all, like nothing, from the other school. That was really kind of invalidating. But the good news is that I heard good news from the school that I did hear from. And I would say, if possible, kind of taking advantage of those pre-resources that they provide, of like if you can go to um, programming that they have or engage with programming as much as you can. I know with all of the COVID-19 kind of pandemic things that we're kind of dealing with right now, this might be like a good thing to kind of be more inclusive for folks that might not be able to travel or things like that in the future, when some of you all who are maybe interested in doing a graduate degree and things like that might kind of look into for having other students be involved in that programming. So definitely like advocate for yourself if you find yourself in that situation, to say, hey, I really do want to be involved, but for certain reasons that you can or cannot get into, say like, hey, have you thought about hosting this via Zoom or whatever? Because I think that it really does give you a good glimpse of, just how I said earlier, of like how the instructors introduce themselves, like just something simple like that. Then you can tell like a whole lot about a person of, do they seem like real, because I've definitely had those professors that I'm like, you're what, like, are you okay, like what's going on, and to be able to like showcase the things that they're passionate about, and different programming that the university offers or department, and then listening to previous students. So I actually how it was very research heavy for me as well. And then I promise I'll shut up in the next 2 minutes so y'all can ask questions. How it was really research heavy for me as well was I was reaching out to people who I had worked with at CSU in my undergraduate, who also were like, oh, I miss what I was doing. And I did study higher ed and I graduated and like all of this stuff. So I was reaching out to them like, hey, what did you like about your school? What did you not like about your school? And most of it was, yeah, I really didn't like this, but I just had to get through it. And now I'm kind of doing those things that I didn't see in my program, or really supporting in the ways that I felt like I needed to be supported um, through undergrad. So I decided to accept, the one offer that I got because that was the whole goal, right? And I am studying higher education with emphases in diversity in higher education and student affairs. And something that I would really, really like to do as of now is work with a residential learning community, just like that program that I was in, like Key, because I felt like it was really influential, or just working with historically marginalized communities, on college campuses, to really kind of be that person or a network of those people that, helps them get through, because it's tough, and it might not, be tough at the same time for every person. Just like for me, it got tough right at the end. Um, but it wasn't very tough at the beginning. So yeah.
Great. So Sam asks, can you talk more about your experience right now, currently in the grad program?
Sure. Thank you. So my current experience has been really interesting, I would say, because um, there are so many different learners, I would say, excuse me, in my classroom spaces. And so it's not even, the kind of like 22 to 25-year-olds that are coming from, different institutions, obviously, different states, different countries, um, but also different majors, right? So I have a lot of like chemical engineering people and like agriculture people, and like I got my major in math, like, things like that. And so when potentially we're asked to kind of maybe engage in like, what does this theory kind of mean? Or can you think about your experience with, kind of the content that we're working with? A lot of times it's a lot of silence. And not to say that that is a bad thing or anything, because, different people need different processing time and, all those different factors. But it's just not kind of like how I thought it was going to be, in like, you know, the kind of, we're all sitting around a table and like asking all these like existential questions and like, having epiphanies every like 5 seconds. It's definitely like a little bit more like normal, I guess, like if that just makes sense, like how we're having a conversation right now, or it's not really a conversation because I'm just talking at you, but it's more like, did you read this? Yes or no? Yes. Okay. Since you read it, like let's talk about this thing on this page. Was that relevant to you? Like it's kind of more of that, which is like really cool because it makes it less intimidating, but also sometimes I'd really like to kind of like dive deep into my studies and how I'm understanding the material. And so I'm always that person that's like, I have a question about this, but what about this? And when this and blah, blah. And like a lot of people say that they like it, but I can see their faces in class. I can see, especially on Zoom, like, when you like freeze for a second, like I'm like, yeah, I don't know if you appreciated that question as much as you said you did. But those things. So I really find myself taking up a lot of space, which I feel like, to be honest, I've like earned, but also like having the space to kind of like dialogue and engage in conversation with other people instead of just saying, this is what I think all the time. And also it's nice to kind of back up what you say by different theories and things like that based on what I studied before. Does that kind of answer your question a little bit more, Sam? Yeah. Okay.
Okay, well, Shayla asks, can you talk more about your content in your current grad school program, because she's also interested. Also, financial aid and scholarships available at DU.
Sure. Yeah, so I've the content is really cool because like in my first class we take an intro to higher education class, right? Because whenever I usually say higher education, people are like, oh, that means you want to like teach, and I'm like maybe, right? But higher education is kind of more broad than that. You can teach, you can work in different student affairs or student facing kind of programs and things like that, and that's more of what I want to do. If teaching comes up, that's great. But I learned this word called retention. And that was a really important word for me to learn, because that's the type of work that I want to do. I want to help students be retained or stay, at whatever institution that they're at. And it might sound like a really little thing, but a lot of us walked away from that class, just really like, wow, now I know like what word I can kind of focus on for the rest of our studies, to really kind of see if this is or to really kind of understand if these are the things that we want to do in the rest of career. The most interesting class I've taken so far would be actually Dr. Garcia's class. And that was really interesting because we had some really, really good conversations, like the best conversations that I've had so far in the program so far. And I feel like all of the projects in all of our classes are really great because they seem like they're actually like doing, the work. We're actually getting experience in the different areas that are about our classes. About scholarships and things like that. So the reason why I'm at MSU Denver in the first place is because the folks at Orientation, Transition, and Retention have a partnership with the University of Denver, and I'm actually serving in a role of a graduate assistant right now. So I'm getting like very hands-on experience in the Orientation, Transition, Retention department. And that was something that I, had to apply for and interview for and things like that. So there are things that are called assistantships where you kind of get that real life, like you are a student affairs professional kind of, which is like really cool to think about while you're, in class learning, the theory is in like all the things that are kind of going into the work that happens. And then, people definitely still like work full time if they were working before they decided to apply to the program. A lot of folks that are doing that are doing school part-time, or some just have the wherewithal to work full-time and do school full-time, which God bless them, because that's a lot of hard work. And with scholarships, I haven't done a ton of research with scholarships at DU, but there's been different like departmental opportunities that you can kind of apply for. So say if you want to go to a professional conference, that deals with orientation or residence life or whatever area that you're interested in, you can definitely apply for those things. And it covers like a part of the monies that you would need. So in that vein, there are scholarships with that, but I'm sure that there are other scholarships that are available at DU. So yeah, hope that
Do you get
answers
paid
your
for
question.
your grad assistant program then? Is that really helping you pay for the schooling?
Yes. So actually what happens with the assistantship is because of the partnership, part of my job pays for like one of the classes that I take, and then I pay for the other class that I take. So it's like really cool. And on top of that, I also get paid for the work that I'm doing with my assistantship as well. So some assistantships, like mine, is kind of like a half thing, and then some assistantships are like, oh yeah, we'll like pay for everything and we'll pay you on top of that. So I think sometimes those positions can be like very like coveted, like I don't want to tell you anything about my position because then like you might be able to take it from me, and I don't know why people have that thing, because you like sign a contract when you do it. So like unless you're just failing everything, then you don't really have anything to worry about. But I think that those are really cool to kind of look into, just because you can get so much experience doing different things that you just never thought that you might be interested in.
Okay. So Ali Garcia says she can jump in to talk about scholarships. I think you might as well go ahead and do
Yes.
that.
I'm sorry.
Hi, Dr. Garcia.
Angela, how are you?
Good, you?
Good. I'm here to support you and to
Thank you.
support Grad School Week. So great job. Thanks for sharing your story. Yeah. So what happens at DU, which may happen at other institutions as well, but when you apply, in your acceptance letter, you get all the scholarships that the institution is willing to give you right up front. So you know exactly what you're getting yourself into. And so if you don't get an assistantship, you land up getting a scholarship. So they give the assistantships go to folks, and then if you don't, you land up getting about a half of a ride in a scholarship from the department scholarship. There's also other scholarships, like one time, so I got my doctorate there. So one time I just got a random $2,000 scholarship one quarter. And so they just added it to, I didn't have to apply. They just added it to my account. So that's how it kind of works there. There are other scholarships available. They have a little bit of a bigger endowment, which is money that the institution invests. It's like the institution savings account, if you will, and that's what they also invest into other things. CU Boulder has a pretty big endowment, and there's been like controversy because some of that endowment goes to funneling fossil fuels. So where your institution actually puts their money is also a really interesting thing to study. Anyways, I won't get on a tangent here, but basically DU has a little bit of a higher endowment than MSU Denver for multiple reasons. DU was created in the 1800s, so they've had a lot more years to have more people giving to that school. They also have graduated folks that then want to give back to their alma mater, and so they just have more time on us. But with that, that means they have more opportunities and alumni that want to give back. And so there is a lot more opportunity usually at institutions that have been open longer and that have a bigger endowment to get more funding. We did have a student in the TRIO program that got a full ride for a PhD program, and he is undocumented, so he's DACA. And so they gave him 2 assistantships, so he was able to work on campus for 2 jobs, and then they paid for his entire housing. They gave him a housing stipend and paid for his tuition. So great deal,
Nice.
awesome, thankful for that. And also we know that science has more money. So thinking also about what area you're going to be applying to is also going to be how much money you're going to have access to. Cool, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great information. I always think of DU being very expensive, but it makes sense that they would have more money than back to invest into their students. So
It is expensive. It still is expensive, but yes.
Still expensive.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
So let's get through some more of these questions. So Audrey asked, do you feel the same sense of community in your grad program than you did in your early undergrad with ethnic studies?
Great question, Audrey. The short answer of that is absolutely not. Absolutely not. No, not no. But I think part of it is because I work at MSU Denver twice a week. That was a weird sentence to say. Twice a week. So I'm there on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And then I work at the University of Denver as an academic coach on Monday and Wednesdays. And I usually have classes on Monday and Wednesdays as well. So I'm just not really on campus as much. I would say, one, I don't live on campus. I actually live out by the airport. So it's just always really funny to me because I'm like, on my college journey, I just wanted to like get away, but I'm literally like in my house still. So it's just kind of going along with that goal, right? But I'm just not on campus a ton. I think I relate to more of the second year folks in my program, which is also really sad because they're about to graduate in June. And I'm very excited for them, but I'm also sad because they really just took me in, especially the second year students of color. Like they just really like took me in, having critical dialogue with me, kind of warning me about some things that I should kind of be thinking about, like encouraging me to engage in self-care, things like that. And I think in my cohort, if you will, or the group that started together this past fall, I want to say there are maybe like 4 or 5 students of color out of maybe 30, something like that. So very small population, things like that. So I just think that my ties aren't as strong, but also it's because I'm kind of around, 2 different campuses a lot, and just doing a lot all the time.
Yeah, that makes sense. What is one thing you wish you would have known before applying to grad school that would have made the process easier or less stressful?
I think kind of with that comes the thought of like the financial question of, you know, if I wasn't necessarily maybe so focused on earning an assistantship, maybe I would have, you know, gotten some more resources for scholarships and things like that. So I wouldn't necessarily have to have a couple of jobs, or, you know, some uh, maybe if I could live on campus, which again is really expensive, um, you know, then I could kind of engage in the community at DU a little bit more than I do already. So I think that, and I think also um, trying to be a little bit more involved, kind of like I was saying before I decided to accept, and really trying to reach out to different instructors that I, you know, thought that their talks were really interesting, things like that, just so I could um, gauge, I guess, like what I what I was gonna, you know, like put myself through. Not that it's been a negative experience or anything like that, but just to kind of build my support system a little bit more than I did initially. But now I think I really have like a great support system with where I work and in the department. And then I think um, also just making sure that I, you know, stick to a schedule. So my schedule was really fun because I would get up at probably like 5 in the morning, um, and then get on the light rail and then go to whatever institution I had to go to or both. Tana knows this. Tana knows this. And I would pretty much get home at like 12:30 every day, like 12:30 p.m. a.m., whatever the one is at night. Yes, that one. And then I'd like do the same thing like over and over and over. So and I get, you know, you do what you got to do, but sometimes that's not like the most sustainable for like mental health, physical health, all the healths. So I think, you know, just kind of reaching out and you know, just engaging in like different resources and things like that would have probably been great for my stress levels, but everything has been pretty good.
That's good to hear. It sounds like you've done a lot of different programs or you've been involved in a lot of different programs throughout your education. Do you feel that same level of like support through these programs, or you were saying that you weren't feeling as connected to your current program as you have been? And it sounds like high school was sort of like the starting point because you were already there and they already had a major support system. And then throughout your undergrad, you also kind of felt that up until your senior year, if I'm correct. So
Mhm.
are you kind of feeling similar to your senior year of undergrad with not being so connected to your grad program?
Um, that's a really good, interesting question. I think um, something that I didn't talk about a lot was my first week of grad school at the University of Denver. I was kind of walking around campus, and in my mind, I was kind of just like, I don't belong here. Like, what am I doing here? Like, why? Like, am I really here? Kind of conversations to myself. And my boss, I'm gonna grab another prop really quick. My boss gave me this magazine, and it's a black woman on there, and she has her graduation cap. And on the inside, she wrote me this note that says, "Remember, you belong here." And obviously I keep that up there so I can kind of look at it when I'm going through my studies, and it's really tough. But having that, you know, support system in my boss, she's also a black woman, which is really, really nice, and I would say a little bit rare at the University of Denver. But you know, the fact that she kind of took time to listen to how I was feeling, about like, I don't, you know, I just don't feel like I belong here. This is so interesting. I don't necessarily feel included, those things. And then to kind of get that in my mailbox like the next couple of days, like, you know, your support system might not always look like who you think it's going to look like, but it can be there.
Yeah, I think a lot of first-gen students experience imposter syndrome, and it sounds like you were going through that kind of situation in your first week. But then having like any support system remind you that you can do it, has gotten you through it. So I think those support systems are really important. So it's good to hear that you still feel included and capable, and you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Stephanie asks, would you recommend going to a grad program right after an undergrad?
I think it really depends on you. If you feel that that's something that you want to engage with right after undergrad, then I would say go ahead and do it. One of my really good friends in undergrad applied to a grad program at UNC Greeley for right after graduation. And that was the right choice for her, whereas for me, I was like, nope, I need a break. I've just been through too much this year. I just need a break. And I think it was really good, again, for me to have that break, because what I thought I wanted to go into wasn't really what I wanted to go into. It was getting me closer to understanding what I wanted to go into. But I think, you kind of just have to do that self-evaluation. And unfortunately, you kind of have to do it a little quickly, within your senior year of undergrad, because, applications and things like that, I believe, at least for DU, are due in December. And then they let you know their decision in January. So like you're still, throughout your senior year in school, and things might, change kind of drastically. I would also say, if you do feel compelled to apply when you're in your senior year, obviously definitely do that, but look at where you're applying to see if you can do what's called a deferment. So say you were really, really excited about it, and then something happened, or you're just like, you know what, I kind of need a break from academics right now, but I worked really hard, and I did get into the school that I do want to get into in the program, but I just think right now might not be the best time. So if you defer, that kind of means you're like, oh, I'll get there eventually, like within a year or a year and a half, something like that. But you'd have to see what the institution that you're applying to's policy is on that, because they will honor your what's it called, your acceptance until that point, and then you can say, oh yeah, I definitely, like, I'm ready now, or like, actually no, I found something else.
So you don't have to go through the whole application process if you just, if you just file for deferment or something like that.
Yep.
That's actually really interesting. I didn't know that. You might as well just apply to anything at any point.
I mean, yeah. Also, when you're applying for things, look for waivers for your application, because grad school applications are more expensive than undergraduate ones. And so, again, just reach out, because, I mean, all I can really say is no. And then you can freak out after that. But if they say yes, then you could be really excited.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think we're going to finish up unless anyone has any more questions, but I do have one more question that I think is sort of an interesting one, and I'm just experimenting with it. But was there any point throughout your academic career that you were like, you maybe were experiencing challenges, or you were going through imposter syndrome, and you were like, you know what, I am going to do this. I am going to finish this. Was there a moment, can you think of one memory where you were like, you know what, I can do this? Maybe by speaking to a mentor or a professor or anything.
Yeah, I did see that there was one more question in the chat, so I'll try to answer both. But I think, interestingly enough, it happened during my freshman year, because I got the opportunity to talk with a woman who was at the end of her doctoral studies in psychology. And we actually got to like sit at her defense. So that's like the last presentation after you wrote your really long paper called your dissertation, and you're basically like defending all the work and research that you've done to like a panel of people that have been kind of working with you throughout that whole like 1 years. I don't know how long the period is, so I have to do some more research about that when I hopefully apply for doctoral programs in the future. But we got to like sit there, and she was just like doing this presentation talking about the research that she's done for like 4 years. And I was like, yeah, 1 to 7 years. Thank you, Dr. Garcia. Because I don't know. But it just like didn't seem, I mean, of course there was so much work that was put into it, but I was like, okay, it's just like a presentation basically. I've done a presentation before. Oh, you wrote like a really long paper? Like I've never written a paper that long before, but like I've written long papers before. You know, it was kind of just this like, oh, okay. If I'm really passionate about something, I have um, you know, the wherewithal to like put time and work in and ask people questions, which I do at 100 miles an hour a day anyway. Like, this is something that I could see myself doing. And so I knew to get to that point eventually, like, I had to, you know, get through this first initial step. And it's really cool too, because I know a couple of people who have actually taken that step from, I graduated from undergrad and going straight to a doctoral program. And then they, you know, get their doctorate, which is amazing. And I don't think that was for me, but but yeah. And then the other question, it said, I saw, and I hope I don't miss anyone else's question, but it says, is there any opportunities to shadow college grad students? And I think that that's a really cool question. I would say if you know a graduate student, ask them if you can join them one day. I'd totally do that. I'd have to obviously like ask my class and ask my professor if that's okay, you know, to enter those spaces and things like that, because sometimes our conversations can be kind of like, I don't know if I want to share this with everyone, but you know, but yeah, I'd be like super into that, because I think it's a really good experience to just be like, oh, you sit in class just like we sit in class. Like you have a bunch of reading too, like or whatever. So
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because I think that even helps with like career exploration and everything too. You don't know what you're capable of until you kind of get into that environment. So I think that that makes a lot of sense.
for sure. And if
Um,
anybody wanted to reach out, really quick, sorry, you can, I'll put my email in the chat, and then you can just like send me an email if you're interested or have any more questions or things like that.
Thank you. That's very nice. So does anyone have any more questions? Any final questions? Yeah, everyone says they're looking forward to your graduation and reading your research, and
Oh, thank you.
you have a fan base here, so we're all looking forward to that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I think with that, we'll end the call. Make sure that you check out the email. And thank you so much for sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you,
Um,
everybody.
and
Yes,
then,
thank you, Angela.
Thank
yes,
you, you
a round
rock.
of applause.
Told you it wasn't scary.
You're right. You're right.
And then, Sam, would you like to show everyone the next
Yes.
grad school day?
Okay, can you all see my screen? Tomorrow we have Hector Frias. So yeah, come, and then next week, I know there were some questions about how to pay for grad school, and I put it in the chat, but Tisha is actually going to be talking a lot about that next week. So click the Zoom link and join us Wednesday from 10 to 11, and we can talk more about that.
And you can click Hector's picture, correct, for the Zoom link
Yes.
on the website?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, for tomorrow's talk.
Yes.
All right, well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.